Hey everyone, this is Perry with the EV Lab, and today I wanted to share with you how hitters generate power. And there's two basic ways that hitters do that. We just saw the home run derby, and we saw lots of bombs, we saw lots of different types of swings. But what I'm going to share with you today is the universal truths about how all of those swings are similar. Because to produce power is about physics. And you have a lot of stuff going on, and I want to kind of touch on those things. But there's two basic ways that players can generate more speed, aside from getting stronger over time. Immediately, there's two ways. One is to increase one of the speeds involved. You got bat speed, you got body speed, you got rotational speed. And if any one of those numbers goes up, then the exit velocity goes up. But then there's also one more big factor, and this one's totally overlooked. Hardly anyone ever talks about it, and I think that it's just that it's kind of misunderstood. When you look at the moment of impact, there's a tremendous amount of force when the ball is moving forward and the bat is moving into a head-on collision. There's a giant crash. I mean, in this case, there's bat shrapnel going everywhere because he gets blown up a little bit. But I want to point out how important it is as to the amount of energy that you can lose at the moment of impact. Now, this player in this particular swing is got his foot down super early. I want to point out that both heels are on the ground, and that's something that doesn't happen when a player has a great weight shift. So this weight shift is a little bit early. So the hip opens up, the front foot's flat, the back foot's still flat. The hands start moving in close to the body, and by now he realizes that he's late, so he starts to adjust the swing severely, shorten it in order to try to create space between him and the ball, and he doesn't quite pull it off, so he's actually very late at impact. So let's continue this and look at the side view. I want to point out just a few things because we could talk about this for a solid hour and not cover everything that's going on in this. When a player gets a pitch on the inside part of the plate, fastball at league average or beyond, the average player in Major League Baseball loses 13% of their length, the swing length, because they're trying to shorten it. They also lose about 13% of their bat speed. So on this adjustment concept, the idea that you're going to adjust your swing, pull your hands in tight, all of those things that happen, you'll see when he starts to swing, his upper body starts to move backwards, kind of like a fall away jump shot, because he's trying to create space after realizing that he's a little bit late. As the hands get pulled in close to the body, something else happens. When the lead arm is bent, that's a big shock absorber. When the back arm is bent, again, another big shock absorber if it stays like that at impact. And in this case, you're going to see that it does. It's both arms are at just about a 90-degree angle. This one's almost perfectly at 90 degrees. And why that's important is because at this moment of this crash, you got the ball with a tremendous amount of energy and force. I've heard anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 pounds of force at the moment of impact at the major league level. You got the bat going this way, you've got the ball coming this way, and that crash that happens is just a tremendous amount of force. So what happens to that energy? It's either going to do one of two things. It's either going to go into the body and get absorbed, or it's going to bounce off the bat and turn back into exit velocity. So one of those two things is going to happen. The leading scientists right now are saying that the ball is on the bats at such a short time that there's no chance that the energy is going to make its way up to the hands. I disagree with that, and there's some solid evidence backing that. But let's just talk about what the obvious things are. Watch the hand and see what happens at the moment the ball hits the bat. It shoves the bat, the ball shoves the bat into the back of this player's hand, and you can see all that vibration that he absorbs in actually both hands. You can see the top hand is a little bit unstable as well. Whenever that kind of impact happens, then a lot of that energy from the pitch is going to go and find its way into those weak spots at the moment of impact. Now, the other obvious factor is that the ball is not on the sweet spot, it's on the handle. There's not as much mass in the handle, so therefore there's not as much mass meeting the ball. So yes, that's a definite factor. The other thing is that the hands are moving at a speed that's somewhere in that 25 to 30 mile an hour range, I think, in most cases. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with blast technology and all of the things that go along with that, but I know that they measure hand speed, and they measure the speed of the bat at the sweet spot. We did a bunch of studies back in the late 1980s. There was a device that came out that would measure bat speed and ball speed at the same time, and then give you a smash factor. That's something that the industry is missing. Is the idea of bat speed is the energy that the body produces. Exit velocity is how that is translated at the moment of impact. So in this case, the bat, when we were doing our studies, it was 90, 95, and it wasn't all that unusual to find 100 mile an hour bat speeds, but it's because it was measuring the end of the bat rather than this. And in this case, it's going to be in that 80 or less range, depending on what's happening with the swing. In this case, where it's severely adjusted, this would go down pretty dramatically, probably all the way down to the high 60s, maybe 67, 68, somewhere in that range. So the hand is moving, let's just roughly say 25 miles an hour. Feel free to correct me if I'm off on that a little bit. The end of the bat's moving at 90. We're going to say that this one's moving at 67. So somewhere in here is that 40, maybe 45 or 50 range. That is how fast this part of the bat is traveling, because that's how it works. I know a lot of people are going to tell you that it's all moving the same, and you want to pull your hands in tight, close to your body, and that creates bat speed, and that is a complete and utter myth. There's nothing about that that's true. The second you move your hands in close to your body, you severely cut down the bat speed. So when this ball hits the bat, that part of the bat is moving slower. How slow? I'm not sure exactly. It would be pretty easy to figure that out if we knew the exact speed of the end and of the sweet spot. You can find out how fast that part of the bat's moving as well. But it's going to be in that 40 mile an hour range. So perhaps that's a solid argument that that's the reason why this ball comes off the bat so slowly. But I'm saying that the shattering of the bat and that the bat getting buried in the hands is an enormous shock absorber. So this shock absorber, both the lead arm and the top hand, this right arm, is both shock absorbers. The fact that his body's moving in that direction, that's a shock absorber. So if any of those things are happening in your swing, then you're going to lose exit velocity. It's as simple as that. Those are the things that are not present when a player hits their very best ball. So let's look at what happens in this force. This is from Sports Science, and they were saying that there's 2,411 pounds of force when this baseball hits, and I'm not sure if that is whether it's just hitting this plexiglass or if that's taken into account the bat moving to meet it, because that's going to increase how much that crash is. But in this case, we're just gonna say that this baseball was traveling at about 90 miles an hour and hits the plexiglass but doesn't do any damage. And then Jenny Finch throws a pitch at 68 and shatters it. So what this goes to show us is that the softball has way more force than the baseball does at the moment of impact, because it's heavier and it just is creating that much more force, enough for to where lower at a much lower speed, it's doing a lot more damage, and that's just proof of the amount of force that's happening there. Now we'll talk about the difference between softball and baseball, but tremendous difference in how much energy is being lost at the moment of impact in softball. A bunt example is a really good one. If you hold the bat really loosely, you've got bends in the elbows, bends in the knees, then you're creating all these shock absorbers. So now when the ball hits the bat, some of that energy is going to get lost at the moment of impact. How much? Well, let's just say that the pitch is at 80 miles an hour, like a high school, lower end high school pitch. And the ball hits the bat at roughly 80. It's going to lose a little bit of speed, but we'll just call it 80. It's going to come off the bat at maybe 7, 8, 10 miles an hour. So what happens to that other 70 miles an hour of energy? And the answer is it gets absorbed into the body. Wherever the body's got weak spots, like a weak grip, like the bat, catching the ball with the bat, so to speak, when a player is a good bunter. Whenever there's weakness at the moment of impact, there's also going to be a tremendous amount of energy that's absorbed into the body. So in this picture, that 80 miles an hour is going to hit the bat, but there's not going to be as much loss because the grip is tighter, the elbows are locked out, and whenever the player is locked out, the ball tends to hit the bat and jump off. So not as much energy is lost at impact. So that's the example of a bunt. Here's a real life bunt, and you can see he's holding the bat super loose, bends in the knees, bends in the elbows, and at the moment of impact, you'll see that the bat actually goes backwards to kind of catch the ball. But you also see how this works. The ball energy hitting the bat pushes the bat into his hand and takes off even more speed. Now this bunt barely gets out here and just kind of dies right there. This is like a serious example of really absorbing the energy from the pitch. But that's the idea of what happens, what goes on at the moment of impact. If your body's in a weak position, if you have a lot of bends, if the energy of your weight shift is not going directly into that moment of impact, you're going to absorb some energy, plain and simple. So what happens when players do it right? The other end of that spectrum, the other possibility of how you can increase how hard the ball is hit is you increase one of the speeds involved. And one of those speeds, you can see his body moving forward, and it unloads all that energy into the moment of impact. This ball goes all the way to that to the top of that fountain. And I wanted to show you a couple of things. Let's look at the side view of this, and then we'll go back, and I want to look at that one more time, because you can tell the energy transfer kind of a little bit easier from that farther away view. But what you're going to see with players that's universal is that they're going to swing and stride at the same time. And that's going to increase the body speed. In other words, they're not going to put their foot down early because that stops the momentum. Now, there are lots of players that believe that and that do that and that feel like that's how you get ground control, but that's not factual. When you stride, when that front heel hits the ground, the back heel will start to leave the ground. And when that's happening, that means that the weight is shifting in a way where just as this finishes releasing, it releases all that energy right before or right at the moment of impact. And that's going to severely lessen how much energy goes into my body. And that's one of those things that is, again, universal, is that the energy from the ball and the bat crashing is tremendous. So you're either going to absorb it or you're going to send it right back in the form of exit velocity or distance or both. They're 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 pretty closely tied together. So at the moment of impact, you'll also see those things form. Front leg locked. You'll see this every once in a while. That is for sure a little bit of an energy leak. It depends on when it happens, though. If it's happening at the moment of impact, then it's a little bit of a loss of energy. So whenever you see little things like that, what I call them energy leaks, it just means that that particular hit might not be at 100%. And that's why we measure it. We call it 100-100. When a player is at absolute max out, it's actually more like 100-100-100. And there's a couple more hundreds to be precise. But the three big ones are, were you 100% on time? Was your swing at 100% power and 100% consistency? In other words, was it at maximum efficiency? And did you meet the ball with 100% of your very best contact? The quality of contact, was that at 100%? Did the barrel, the sweet spot of the barrel, meet the middle of the ball exactly? And the answer to that is almost never. These three things almost never happen. And the reason for that is because it's extremely difficult to get all of those body parts in sync and time that in sync body swing to the pitch speed. See, golfers have it, they have the same dilemma when it comes to their body speed, but they're creating it off of a tee. The ball's sitting on a tee all the time. And in this case, it's the same sort of, because they're getting the same speed pitch over and over and over. And so it's kind of like like it's sitting on a tee, because they know exactly when the ball and where the ball is going to show up for the most part. And that's a huge advantage. And that's also one of the reasons why in a home run derby or in batting practice, players are able to pull off their A swing all the time, because they know what to expect. They know the timing of the pitch. And that's a whole nother discussion that we will definitely get into very within the next couple of videos. But for today, I just wanted to point out how important it is that the body syncs up and moves the weight shift into the moment of impact. Front leg locks, lead arm locks, backside fully releases. When all of those factors happen, then you're going to see balls that are hit extremely well. This also has a lot to do with the quality of contact. When the player is on time and they release the backside, this continues to release. So this, you'll see that the belt is pretty level. And that's because the hip was allowed to continue to turn. And when the hip continues to turn, it creates more rotational speed. So when you see a player not release the backside, wherever that stops rotating, then this stops rotating. So if he were to not release the back foot here, you would see that backside stop. The hip would stop, and then it would start to go down. The shoulder would start to go down. And both of those things are tied to how that back foot moves. When the back foot releases fully, it allows everything to turn and coordinate the turn along with the weight shift. That's one of the beauties of striding and swinging at the same time, is that you're marrying up all of the forces, all the weight shift going into the ball, the rotational speed, and you're minimizing how much energy you lose at the moment of impact. It all comes down to those factors 100% of the time. So I want to go back and look at this one more time from a little bit of a distance. So you'll see the load, the hip turns in, that's going to enhance rotational speed as well. And then the stride starts to go forward, but you see that the body stays back. His center of mass kind of stays back. And so the hip inches forward, the stride starts to go forward, but the center kind of holds its own. There's some hang time in there. And then once he sees the pitch and decides to go, now the foot goes down and all of that energy goes into the moment of impact. When that's timed correctly, that's when you see gigantic bolts. when that's timed incorrectly. There were a couple players that really struggled. Jazz Chisholm just hit a few homers, and I can promise you that we'll take a look at his swing at some point as well. But the timing of it was not the same. When this foot gets down too early, the weight shift happens too early. When that weight shift happens too early, it breaks this chain, that magic little chain of all of these forces marrying up and maximizing each other. Rotation, forward momentum, and then the body locking out minimizes how much energy you lose at impact. And that's what causes the ball to jump off the bat. So you'll see it here, and you'll see players do it in a different way with slightly different timings. In other words, some players' foot might get down a hair ahead of other people, but watch what happens when that heel hits. This heel is leaving. And when that's the case, it's what I would say is that it's because the weight shift and the rotation is marrying up and syncing up at the same time. And then you see things like this where the knee's going down. In fact, one of the other homers that he hit in the swing off, he went all the way down to the ground. But that's something that happens after the fact. That's long after the ball's left the bat. So the ball jumps and he's still in this position where all that energy went in that direction, directly into the moment of impact. Locked out, you'll see that as a universal trait when the player hits their best bolt. Because what I'll get now after this is a bunch of examples of really big, strong players bending their lead elbow and bending their front knee and all of those factors. And then they hit a little Gork double over the third baseman's head. So I don't want to compare what happens when a player gets a hit. I want to compare when a player hits his very best bolt. Why? Because, and that's an important thing too. My goal in this is to get down to what the best mechanics are, not what works under pressure. Of course, players are going to compromise their swing at times. They have to. But when everything's perfect, that's the swing that I want to talk about. When a player hits their absolute A swing, that's when these factors are coming into play. This is that 513-foot homer. You'll see this load take place. The hip turns in, the knee turns in a little. Doesn't matter whether the foot's on the ground or not. Brent Rooker, you saw with his toe touch. He could have his toe down on the ground. It wouldn't really matter all that much. And then the hands go back, and you see this tremendous stretch in his torso. When the hip opens and the hands are all the way back, it's going to create a tremendous amount of stretch in the lead shoulder, the upper arm of the lead arm, the abs, obliques, all of that. You'll see this release, you'll see this lockout, you'll see this lockout. Those things are always present when players hit their very best bolts. That one was massive. And to get that kind of a reaction out of Vladdy, who every year, somewhere between 40 and 75 balls will be hit at about 115 miles an hour. Now, to put that in perspective, Giancarlo Stanton, and he are the leaders in this. This number is starting to go up. But a few years ago when I did this study, these were the only two players that had tens of events that were taking place, like 40 or 50 or 60 balls hit at over 115 miles an hour. The rest of the field, it was 1 or 2 or 3 events per player. Some players might sneak up to 7 or 8, but for the most part, the players that were creating the most 115 mile an hour exit velocities, Vladdy was one of those. So to get a rise out of him like that is saying something. So you'll see the hands go back as the hip starts to go forward. Some will interpret this as the foot getting down early. I'm going to tell you that it's getting down when it needs to get down, and that front heel hits when the back heel is leaving. Sometimes that's slightly off. And again, no two swings that a player makes are ever exactly the same. They're always different, like your signature. You can make 100 signatures and you'll probably love 10 of them and you'll like 60 of them, and then there'll be, the rest will be okay, and then a few of them that you just don't like. And that's the same thing that happens with swings. There's a group of movement patterns that happen. And when this stretch happens, you're going to see tremendous bat speed, because that's where bat speed comes from, is stretching this rubber band, stretching this rubber band, creating tension in the wrists. And when that's happening with that great bat lag, that's gonna also be a rubber band that releases energy right at the moment of impact. So elastic energy creates bat speed, period. It also happens with this weight shift, and that's the beauty of what I'm talking about with when they stride and swing at the same time. They marry up the rotation with the lateral release off the backside. When all that energy hits and the player locks out correctly, that's when the ball jumps at max, period. We can argue that, but you're going to lose that argument, because when you look at it for 35 years and it's over and over and over exactly the same way, you look at a player and when they hit their hardest exit velocity, it always is the same. It's always including this universal set of movement patterns. It looks different from player to player, but it's always there. I would even say that this 513 has a little bit more that's left in the tank, just because the lead arm is still a little bit bent there. So whenever you do that, whenever you break up the lead arm, there is an argument to be made that regardless of whether this is bent or not, because of the fact that the hands are moving back, he's still creating a tremendous amount of stretch or elastic energy in his torso, even though this is bent. So it's not all about just locking it out. It's about creating that stretch. But at some point, players that really hit mammoth bombs, they're going to lock that lead arm out. And if it's at impact, it's one thing. If it's a tiny bit before impact, it's helpful, because what if he hits a ball back here if he's late? If you're late and that lead arm is still bent, you'll lose a little bit of energy. Is it a lot? No. Is it worth mentioning? In baseball, again, it's not as important. And that's why you'll see players hit a ball oppo and it'll go 350 and leave the yard. And then they'll pull a ball 480 feet to the pull side, or even in the same direction. But what you'll see that's different is one of these movement factors or the other, one of these elements is slightly off. But that's the universal picture that you're going to see, is energy has been released fully into that moment of impact, and the body is not in a weak position, and so therefore the ball jumps off the bat. And the greater the speed coming in here, the more important that becomes. Baseball players, because of their strength, because of the fact that the bat is heavier than a softball bat and the ball is lighter than a softball, they get away with more stuff at impact. In other words, they can be a little bit off and still have the ball jump off their bat. But that does not change the fact that when all of it's perfect, you're going to see things that are pretty universal. The full release, full rotation happens because the backside allowed it. If this backside gets stuck back here because he's late, then guess what happens? This stops rotating and it starts to go downward. And that's just the way it happens. It's the way the human body works. But when it's fully released, you see that belt being a little bit more of the level type. That's a whole nother discussion we'll get into in a different video, the idea of the tilt and the launch angle stuff. But for now, stretching rubber bands is what increases bat speed. That's a major factor. Body speed is all about releasing off the backside, holding that energy for a length of time, and then going. We'll do a whole segment on that at one point, the whole idea of what's created in that hang time. But for today, it's just important to note that it's very necessary. You gather all your energy in one place and then expend it all at this place at the moment of impact. I love these 4D views. Especially this rear view really allows you to see the weight shift, and you can see that the hip is fully turned in. But you see how when the decision is made to go, it's an all-out thing. He's loading, and then he's going. And when he goes, he strides and swings at the same time. He strides, and the lateral body movement, the momentum of his body speed is married up to the rotational forces, and that's when you see that magic happen. Lockout, locked out, fully released, and fully in sync. I call it body timing when the body parts are all in sync. There's a flow that goes along with it. But if the foot gets down early, it breaks that flow. The foot needs to get down when it needs to get down. And when does it need to get down? Just like when you throw, you don't talk about getting your foot down because it knows, your body knows when to get the foot down if it's efficient. When this front heel hits, the back heel is leaving. That's an efficient weight shift. Another big factor, especially when this locks out early, the lead arm, and in Corey Seager's case, that's going to happen all the time. There's a tremendous amount of energy that is built up in this fulcrum because now he has a much longer lever. When you bend the lead elbow, you have two levers. You have the upper arm, and then you have the forearm. And so now you have the forearm has a fulcrum with these two, this shorter lever here, and the bat. But you also have the upper arm and the forearm also has a fulcrum. And so whenever you do that, you take that energy and you dissipate it. The shorter the lever, the less the leverage is going to help you. The longer that lever, Archimedes, I think, the father of this concept of leverage, said, give me a long enough lever and I can move the world. And basically what he's saying is you want to create the longest lever possible, and you want to hold that energy as long as possible with this bat lag because that creates a tremendous amount of force or stretch in the wrists. You can feel this if you want. You take your lead arm and lock it, and then take your top hand and hold your thumb out on your lead arm, and then pull it backwards. And you'll feel that tension build in the wrists as long as the lead arm is locked. Now bend the lead arm and watch what happens to all that energy. All that energy just dissipates. It just goes. And so when players pull their hands in by bending the lead elbow, they also lose that bat lag angle. So if he were to have done that, his barrel would be all the way out here by now. And so the barrel is outside the ball. So the only true way to keep your hands inside the ball and keep the barrel inside the ball is something that looks like this, where you're holding that bat lag angle and your hands are inside, but so is the barrel. That's the whole point of inside the ball. I'm gonna have one specific thing on inside the ball because it's a very overused and misunderstood thing. See, he's at full extension after he hits this, so he's late on this. He's late because right about there is where he gets full extension. And you can also see that his gaze is out there. And so where he expects to hit the ball is a little bit after where he hits it. And that's very, very common. Players are late and early by 6 inches a foot all the time. It's very, very rare that they're 100% on time. So this is an example you can try to understand how elastic energy works. You can take this finger, lift it off the table, and slam it as hard as you want. That's called pushing the energy into the table. And then you're going to see him grab this finger, pull it up, and then release it. And the amount of energy that's released is dramatic. So the first one's pushing. The second one is that. And when you stretch and release, now you're creating a different level of energy, is that stretch. Now there's a third one, and that is at the moment that you stretch this middle finger, if you also apply force at the end of it. So in other words, this one's just stretched and released. If you stretch and then apply energy where you're pushing at the last minute, last second, you're creating even another little bit level of speed. And that's what's happening in this swing, is he's pulling the bat into action with the torso, with all of these muscles that are on stretch. He's pulling the bat into action and then pushing it at the end. So he's tapping into all that elastic energy, but he's also tapping into the push. But the players who are pulling their hands in and pushing the bat into action are only getting the push, unless in some way they're able to time it like he does, where his hands go back in a perfect timing to where the hands go back just as the front hip opens. And again, the timing of this is going to be different because every player's flexibility, their strength through their torso, their fast twitch abilities, all of those things are different with different hitters. And so this concept that I'm talking about looks a little bit different from player to player, but the universal facts are still physics. It's all about how much energy do you lose at impact. And that comes down to, are you locked? Are you bent? Did you hit it on a weak part of the bat? All of those factors come into play every single time contact is made. Pardon me. Did you push all that energy into the moment of impact? If the answer is no, then there's a little bit missing. Is it 100%? No, it's 90%. I don't know. It's hard to tell exactly. But the 100-100 is about applying your A swing 100% on time. 100% body timing plus 100% pitch timing is what happens when you hit a 500-foot ball. So that energy that's stored up in this bat lag in the wrists is just one more form of elastic energy. A lot of players don't even take advantage of that. So this is another little experiment that I did to prove that point of elastic energy. This is from 8 feet, and I hooked up the radar gun and used the analysis software to come up with the time that it took from the time it leaves my hand to the time it hits the backstop is 0.20 seconds. But at 8 feet, the amount of elastic energy is creating 29 miles an hour of speed. When you pull that back 2 more feet, it still hits the mat at 0.20 seconds because you've increased how much elastic energy is stored up in the tubing. It takes the same amount of time to get there because it has sped up, even though it's coming from a farther distance. And it's sped up dramatically. It's 10 miles an hour faster, and therefore that's what makes up for that extra time. So when a player stretches the lead arm, a lot of players feel like there's no way you could get around on time. But the opposite of that is true. You're actually putting that muscle on stretch, and so you're creating more bat speed, but at the same time, you're cutting down the time because it's moving through the air faster. So when a player lengthens their lead arm, they're not losing speed. They're either at the same speed, same timing, or they're increasing it. So that's a myth. That is a total myth. I wanted to show this celebrity. This is T.O. Terrell Owens is hitting this bomb. But now that you've seen what it is that creates speed, you can pick it out in all different forms. Did he load with leverage? Yes, he did. Did he hold on to some of that energy? He's keeping the upper body back a little bit, and then when the decision to swing happens, the front foot gets down and the backside releases. So the front heel hits as the back heel is releasing. Lead arm is locked, front side is almost locked or really close to locking. The backside is almost fully released. It's kind of tough because his stride is so wide. That's another important note, is that your brain, when it realizes that the ball is not there yet, overstriding happens when it's a mechanism that your mind helps you with. It directs the body to hold on. The ball's not there yet. Now release all that. And so what the body's trying to do is it's trying to get to those universal truths. It's trying to get to that moment where all of those forces are married up. The forward momentum, so body speed, the body rotation, and you notice how his foot didn't quite fully rotate. Actually, it does. He continues that. I thought that one stopped a little bit, but it didn't. So you'll see, again, full rotation with that hip. It's almost like he had to drag it off in order to finish that, but he finished the rotation. And this ball was hit pretty hard. Just a super low line drive that made it all the way out. This is the other one that I wanted to share, and this is Cecil Fielder back in the day hitting a ball to the roof of Tiger Stadium. But again, you're going to see the same universal truths going on. Whenever someone does something like this, I don't know how far that ball was, but it's not, I think only a couple of people in history have hit the ball to that roof in Detroit. Locked out, fully released. And you'll also see that weight shift and that magic moment where the forward momentum, he's holding on to this energy. It's like he's not letting everything go forward. And the players that get their foot down super early, they break that rhythm. They break that little magic bond that happens when you stride and swing at the same time. Front heel hits, back heel's leaving, and all that energy goes into the moment of impact. So there's absolutely no place in the body for energy to hit the bat and go and try to find its way into the body. It just hits the bat and goes directly back to the ball. And that's the less of that you lose at impact, the more jump off the bat that you get. So the energy that he's producing is the bat speed and this body speed and the elastic energy. But how that bat speed gets used is when the body coordinates itself and creates all of these factors and marries up the rotation with the lateral movement, with the locking out of the body. When all of that comes together, that's when you see the giant bolts. Now, why we don't train like that and why every player isn't trying to do that every time, that's the mystery. This happens so often by accident. A lot of times players will get fooled. They don't normally lock out. They bend the lead elbow, but at times they get fooled a little bit and have to overextend the lead arm, and that's when the best bolts happen. Giancarlo Stanton hits a bunch of bolts every year on off-speed pitches because his goal is not necessarily to hit a 100-mile-an-hour pitch in here and have all that full extension. It's to hit that 100-mile-an-hour pitch away when it's more like 95. So when the off-speed pitch shows up at 85, he gets fully extended. Is it by design or is it by accident? That's another argument to be made. But I would say my goal with EV hitting is 100-100. That's the goal every single time. Be 100% on time to the pitch with 100% of your body timing intact. And that includes a lot of factors. That includes that elastic energy getting stretched, all the rubber bands getting stretched and released on time. That's forward momentum. That's rotational speed. But it all is encompassed in that moment of impact when the backside releases all that energy into the ball and the ball jumps off the bat like crazy. It's not a mystery. It's just simple physics.